We're looking at making a different style thumb panel on a glove. Using the same measurements and tracing that we had before for my left hand, we'll now make this different style which has a thumb piece in a panel. Rather than sewn in separately as is seen here on the side of the hand of the glove, we're going to make a panel, because this seam sits right on the thumb joint, the CMCJ as it's called, and sometimes the person is very tender there and that seam can be an irritant to them. So the other style is going to run down and avoid irritating that joint. We'll just demonstrate what it looks like. Pulling the glove on thoroughly and seeing that there's nothing to trouble the thumb in this new style. It's completely smooth over the two joints of the thumb, whereas the old style glove, which is actually quite simple to make, once we pull it on thoroughly you'll see that there's quite a lot of seamage around the thumb. And that point there particularly can be a stress point on the hand. But looking at the two together, you'll see that that actually gives a much smoother surface. And if someone's burned or injured on that thumb, it's a kinder version. And you'll see it's got less creasing and seems to do a very good job of a smooth and comfortable fit. We have trialled it now on several patients and they've preferred it in many cases. So this will be showing you how to do away with that thumb by inserting a panel for that entire area. Now you'll see that trying to work out how to make it, I realized that we needed to take away that whole area where the thumb used to be joined in and cut away into the glove a panel. So using the very same outline and calculations, you'll notice that we normally would trace the pattern that's been made on the hand tracing, and in this case I'm using a piece of paper that's been folded over. It's a little harder to see what I'm tracing, but you can do it on the one layer and then just make a double thickness. But we're going to use it as if we've actually made that pattern and cut it out on a piece of fabric. In fact, sometimes when I'm in a hurry I just do use the previous simple style single piece of pattern paper and just cut it into the fabric. At the moment you'll see I'm cutting it into the paper so that we can see exactly what is going to happen. But this can be done directly onto the fabric once you know what you're going to do, and therefore it needn't be a more difficult and lengthy process at all. Here we are making the same outline for the pattern with a hem and the fingers all neatened up. Now you'll notice it's on the double, and as we can see there'd be the top layer, which would be the side that you'd cut the hand webs, and then the bottom layer where you're going to cut the thumb. Now normally you would mark those areas that you were going to cut the hole for the thumb, but in this case you'll see I'm just checking that I can still put the zip in the normal place on the volar side, and that would be the hem. And now the difference will be that I'm going to cut a panel up and over where I'd normally put the thumb in. And just so that you can see, it's mostly on the volar side. I'm just checking what width I'm actually cutting away, and I will need possibly a little bit of an allowance for the seam. So I'm going to cut away that area from the main body of the glove. And then I'd be replacing it with something rather unusual. And so you'll see that that's where the fold is, but most of the area cut out is on the underside of the hand. And the back of the hand only has that little bit cut away from the pattern. Now, what will we need to replace what we have cut away? I found that I need a template that has the shape I want, but I'm just making sure that I've got the allowance for the width at the top of the thumb and the width at the base joint of the thumb, and that I'm going to be able to accommodate the thumb with that panel. It's going to go around the top flange and the lower joint. And then it's going to come down and be the width that allows for the flat seam either side. It's going to make its way up as a flat seam, and then the underside of the thumb actually comes around towards the back of the hand, so that the seam lies towards the back of the hand. Because I'm happy with that template and I'm going to need to leave a pattern in the patient's records, I'll actually make a paper piece so that it stays with the glove pattern in the patient's record book. So this strange shape, which is a bit like an S, depending which way you're looking at it, can be a little confusing to decide which is left or right. And the way of telling is that the side with least is on the back, and it's sort of towards the back by the fold line, and the side that has more thumb, the curve that wraps around the flesh of the thumb, actually turns that corner and ends up joining together at that point just about on the fold of the main hand piece of fabric. Now, just to be sure what we've got here, we write the patient's name and that it's a left hand and what colour we'd be making it in, which fabric, and always putting a date to identify which pieces of pattern go together, in case they are later patterns with a more recent date if you are picking up the patient's records and making a garment. Now, working out that this is actually the left hand, as we said, that would be the side, the outside of the fabric to match up with the outside of the glove piece, and writing the same details. Now, just to show you how it works, this would be where the seam, the fold would have been. It's why I almost make it with the normal piece of pattern and then do the cutout afterwards, because it can be quite hard to see just where the pattern's going to lie with that piece missing. But here we are doing it just as we would, cutting away down between the fingers, getting the slight cut away on the tops of the fingers. And now with the outside of the fabric up and the outside of the pattern, then we're going to cut out that panel. Well, actually it's the hole for the panel, isn't it? And then to make sure we don't make any mistakes, marking that that's the back of the hand with the slash for the gussets, and this is the underside of the hand with the zip on the volar side. And our zips always run in inches, so that will be the length of the zip. And now to find a piece of fabric that's going to fit that economically, with the outside of the fabric and the outside of the pattern, but you're looking for the straight grain of the fabric to run straight down the panel. It's a little bit of a tricky shape to try and cut it smoothly, but with everything that you're sewing, the more accurately and smoothly you cut, the better the garment fits together. So that is the very strange way it wraps around the thumb, which is hard to demonstrate with the fabric loose, but that is how it joins together up to there on the flat. And I always make sure that I sew the panel on top of the glove, as you can see, because otherwise you aren't able to pinch together that last bit up the thumb. So you'd sew that one side and then you'd sew the other side up to there, the same dot, which actually is coming further around the thumb, around the front of the thumb, and wrapping around the thumb and getting to the back. And then, although it often doesn't look as if it's going to join because of the peculiar shape, one going concave and the other one going convex, they have the most satisfying way of accommodating the thumb, which I think we've seen when comparing the two gloves. Those are all the pieces of pattern that you'll have. And that's how you make the pattern for the thumb panel new style glove. Just showing again the process of sewing the garment. The first thing I would always sew is the thumb panel on the top of the main piece of hand fabric. I'd sew it up the one side and then up the other side to that point where it's going to join together. So in two separate processes. And then the third process is to pinch that thumb together at that point and sew it closed. So writing it correspondingly onto that thumb panel, that's the first, second and third process of the glove. That third one's hard to indicate, but it's closing those together, which does work, although it always looks a bit odd at the time. Then once that's all together, the next thing I'd do would be sew the hem right the way across while the fabric's wide open. The panel's joined in there, and so you'd sew it in one complete piece, just turned up and stitched with a zigzag so it can stretch and yet also hold the hem down in place. And then the next step after putting the thumb in put the zip in on top of the hem in the position that we've already marked. So that's the process number 5. And then this is the 6th process, and we'll do all 3 together. It's slashing at least 1 centimetre down into the back of the hand in order to place the gussets. I always sew them underneath, nipped with the pin at the point, and then work up each side with a flat seam. So we're going to call that the 6th process, and we'll call all 3 gussets the 6th process. And now the 7th is that I usually close the side of the glove together, so we've got a complete tube. Right the way down from the hem to the end of the finger, the little finger, making sure it all fits together, because they are cut together exactly the same, therefore they fit together exactly the same. But now the next process, which I think we've now got as number 8, is to join the insides of the gussets, the top of the hand to the bottom of the hand, and that closes the glove up entirely. So this is putting this new style thumb panel glove, as with all of them, making sure you've got them onto the fingers before you try and do up the rest of the glove and rearrange it to make it smooth and comfortable. And that just shows how smooth and snug that new style thumb is. It's very satisfying once it's on, compared to the very simple style that we've been doing for a long time, and generally gives a perfectly good fit, very dependable. Once again, pull it all together, lift the zip up so that the seam has a lining underneath the zip, and now looking at the 2 together, they're both giving a good fit, but there's something slightly better about the thumb panel, to my way of thinking. It doesn't seem to wrinkle up quite as much in that area. It seems to be a very smooth and reliable fit as well, if you can get the stitching to all sit smoothly. And that's it. We have tried it a few times now. We're waiting to see the results on patients, because that point there between the thumb and the hand is possibly the weak point. It will have the stress. But with that smooth seam going around the panel, it does a good job. It's just leaving the one point.